then I've been a product manager. So I'm hoping to help you guys. You can decide whether you guys are the unicorn or the cat. I don't know which one is the community within product, but I want to help you guys realize that by teaming up and having product and community work well together, product can go from good to amazing. And so I want to give you guys some tips, some do's, and don'ts. But before we get started, I want to tell you a story about cookies. There was a British man, this may have been a while ago. He got to a train station early, very early, because he read the schedule wrong. And so he had some time to kill before he caught his train. And so he went to the local coffee shop right there at the train station, and he went and bought a cup of coffee and a pack of cookies. Now, he looked around the coffee shop and it was actually kind of full, so he couldn't grab a table by himself, but he did see an open chair next to a businessman. And so he sat down next to the businessman, and he opens up his newspaper, and he starts reading. And wouldn't you know, the businessman leans forward, stops reading what he was doing, he grabs a pack of cookies, he opens them, and he takes a cookie. Now, I think a lot of us Americans don't take crap from anyone, so maybe we wouldn't actually take this quietly, but the British, as I understand, are a little more reserved and quiet, so he sat there and just stewed on it. And he just was in disbelief. Someone ate my cookies. What's going on? And so he sits there and he's stewing, and he reads his newspaper a little bit, and then he's finally like, you know what? If he's going to eat my cookies, I'm going to make sure I get one at least. So he reaches across, he grabs a cookie, and he eats it. And they proceed to go through the entire pack of cookies, alternating each one eating a pack. Or eating one of the cookies until the pack is gone. And then the businessman gets up and catches his train. A few minutes later, our protagonist, he's going and he is now getting up to catch his train. And as he folds up his newspaper and he collects his coffee cup, he looks down and sees a pack of unopened cookies. The whole time he had been eating that businessman's cookies. And so the moral of the story is you want to have empathy for the other side, because you never know when something that you think is totally wronging you, it may be the other side. So today I hope to help you better understand when product may be looking for something totally different than what you think is the most helpful thing you can do for them. So I'm going to teach you the product development process. It's a very simple 5-step process, and I'm going to walk you through some do's and don'ts in each of those steps and exactly what you can do, which will make your product team love working with you. And so let's start walking through that product lifecycle. So in the first step, a good product manager is going to gather signal. What that means is they're going to try and find out as much information as possible on what should we do next. There are always a million things you can build, and so a good product manager is going to be trying to find out what does sales know, what does marketing know, what does community know, what is the support team tired of dealing with, and what are the analytics telling me, and what is management and leadership barking at me they want. So they're trying to get all this signal in all these different places. And then they have the dreaded job of prioritization. Of all the things we could possibly build, we only get to build 1, maybe 2 things at a time. And so I've got to choose from all of those what to actually build. And then from there, I actually have to sit down with my designers and engineers and figure out what's this going to look like and how is it going to solve the problems that our community, our market needs, and make sure we build the right thing. Then you launch it. And this is where often, I think community always hopefully gets looped in. But this is an important part. It's making sure that you get that out there and it really resonates and takes off with your community. And then hopefully, although I talked to a few people, maybe this doesn't always happen, but hopefully the last step is iteration. Because when you first launch something, it's usually not 100% perfect. And there are always opportunities to make often small changes to make things much better. And so this is the complete product lifecycle. And now let's dive into each one of those steps and learn a little bit more about how community can really play a good part in all this. So the first step, gathering signal. Remember, I'm a product manager. I'm trying to figure out what I should build next. I want to get as much information as possible to try to make the most intelligent choice. So the first thing is, don't give them a huge feature request list. That always makes their life a lot harder. Everyone always wants to request features. And a massive list is so hard to parse through. What you want to do instead is help them understand customer problems. Now, if you look at all of these objects, they all do the same thing. They help you hang things, but they do them in very different ways. The object in the bottom right corner here, the tacker, I use that in my apartment in San Francisco. It was built in the 1920s, and it has horsehair plaster walls. What that means is if you put a nail, a screw, anything in the wall, the whole wall starts disintegrating and just turns into powder, and you just instantly know my security deposit is gone. So what the tacker does is it puts a really tiny hole in it at a very specific angle that makes it really strong, even though it doesn't make your whole wall disintegrate. So it solves a very specific problem for old buildings and cities. Now above that you see what I like to call the fighting octopus, which is essentially great for hanging scarves and coats and jackets. But I would not advise hanging a painting, which some of these other objects might be good for. And so the point is that all of these could be feature requests to hang stuff on the wall. But if you get to the underrooted cause of what people are really trying to do, you can realize that if your customer is really asking for a way to hang their jackets, well then you know what's the better choice here. But if you only look at the feature request, you're going to be asking for this in a dozen different ways, and it's going to be really hard for the product manager to understand how important this is. So the way to get to a feature request to a problem is to use 5 whys root cause analysis. And so an example of that was when I was at KissMetrics, we got really worried because a bunch of our high-end customers said, oh my God, Jason, you have to give us Salesforce integration. And anyone who's ever dealt with Salesforce knows that that is kind of a monster. You need to hire like lots of engineers to work on it. Some of them are going to be stuck on the project forever because there's always changes to deal with. And so we're really terrified that as a small scrappy team, there was no way we were going to be able to do it. So we jumped in and 5 whys them to figure out exactly what they really meant. So I went to the people who were requesting it and I said, well, why do you want a Salesforce integration? And he said, well, our sales team needs the data that's in KissMetrics. Okay, well, why can't you just log into KissMetrics and get that? Well, we don't want to actually have our salespeople have to log into another account. We don't want to have to train them in how to use your product. And everything else they need is in Salesforce. And so there's no reason to make an exception here. So I said, all right, fine. Well, why do salespeople need it? Because we were a marketing analytics tool. So what's the sales team need with that? And so that's when they told me, hey, okay, the reason that we want the Salesforce integration is because these guys need it to look at leads. So it helps them close deals. So that was really interesting. How does a web analytics tool help them close more deals? And that's when I got to the root of it and I found out that what they really wanted to do was the salespeople want to look at what the recent activity of a user was so that when they're on the call with the lead, they can say, hey, I saw you just checked out that feature. Let me tell you about this other feature you haven't tried yet that's awesome and will be great for you. Or they speak to that feature. And that's what helps them close the deal. And so when we got to the root of it, we realized there was one tiny feature in our entire product that was the only thing they really needed. And so instead of building a massive Salesforce integration, we made a really cheap iframe that shows up in Salesforce and shows that one feature page. It took one engineer less than a week to build it. And from that point forward, all we did was, we were still a little paranoid we might need to build more. But we didn't, and it made it so that every time someone got set up with this, I personally welcomed them to that Salesforce feature, because they had to do one little thing to turn it on properly. And I said, if you need anything else, if this doesn't do everything you need, email me anytime. I'm the product manager. You can have a direct line to me. We onboarded dozens of customers to this, and I never once got another request. So not only can 5 whys help you understand the problem, but it can actually save you and your team, your product team, lots of time because they won't overbuild or build something that's like more than what's necessary. So another example in my experience at KissMetrics was we had a feature called Live, which was a stream of activity of all the users on our site. So everything that's happening right now, you have a TechCrunch spike, you can see what everybody's doing on your site. And we found that there were a bunch of customers telling us, hey, we really want more of your product to be real time. We want to be able to see everything that's happening, and normally we had processing delays because there's lots of analytics data to churn through. And it turns out, using 5 whys again, we discovered that there was only like 3 or 4 little use cases, again, that were what they needed to be real time, and we could do all of it by iterating on an existing feature. So again, we saved tons of time and effort and built something our customers love simply because we took the time to ask why. So to recap, in the gather signal phase, the thing you can do most to help your product manager and help communicate with your product team is to communicate problems instead of features. And the best way to do that is to ask why. So anytime you see somebody tweet at you they want a feature, or somebody in your community is interacting with you and they're saying, hey, can you guys have this? Find out the story behind it. That will save your product manager having to do that themselves and make them feel like you're really helping them out, getting a leg up. The next step is obviously prioritization. So now that you've got all this signal, the PM has to make a call on which of these many things that everybody's bugging him they want, which of those things you actually build. And so the first thing is, don't take no personally. One of the hardest parts about a PM's job is that you have to get really good at relating and getting along with everyone in your company, and get really good at telling them all no all the time. Because you're constantly saying, that's great, I hear you, but we can't build that right now. And so don't take it personally. They have to say it to everyone all the time, and customers. But every once in a while they will listen, and the more you're able to actually arm them with good information, the more likely they are to actually say yes. So, how can you help them understand the business impact? Well, I like to bucket it into 3 groups. The first group is time. If you can save time for your community because, hey, they're spending lots of time, there's lots of friction for our users when they're trying to do this, that can be really powerful information. There can also be the, hey, as a community team, we're wasting hours upon hours working on doing things manually. That wastes us tons of time. We've staffed up a bunch of people. I've heard this before a number of times, where the product team has no idea how many man hours are spent on something. And so if you can quantify that, it often can make them realize, like, wow, if we save 40 hours a week from collectively on our community team, think about all the other awesome things they could do instead. The other way is obviously money. If you can prove that, hey, more of our paying part of our community will be happier, more people will become paying users, or fewer will quit or cancel on us, those are all great reasons the business can make more money, and that will help, again, the product team make a great decision. And then one of my favorite, actually, is delight. So if you can do things that will take a product that's, okay, pretty good, and instead make it so people are like, this is the best thing ever. Like, that is so helpful for people to understand how this is going to impact people in that way. So how can you quantify this? I know there's been lots of talk around ROI and metrics and stuff, and I know it can be hard because either you don't have access to the information, or it's just not something you're used to, or some of it can be a little wishy-washy. So the thing that you can ask yourself are, how much time are you spending on these tasks? Can you quantify that? Because in the end, we can look and say, okay, the salary of people in the community department are X, and if they're all spending these combined hours, you can suddenly realize how much money is being spent on something. You can also ask, how many users does this impact? And even if you don't have the full raw numbers, if you know the personas of your business and the use cases that people use, if you can say that, hey, this impacts 70% of our user base, because I know I've spoken to like a dozen people in my community that all fit in that persona, suddenly you can make a pretty compelling case with more qualitative data instead of quantitative data. Next then you can ask, are there people churning? If you see people like ranting and raging on Twitter or somewhere else in your community saying that they're really upset and they end up quitting, like being able to quantify that and saying like, hey, we know lots of people are leaving the product because of this, and here's the raw data I've seen in my community, that's another great way to convey. And then, of course, like I said before, if you can convey how this might increase revenue, because maybe some of your bigger members of your community can be drawn in more people will become more engaged because of it. Those are all great reasons. And so often I think it's not about necessarily coming up with a perfect number, but the exercise of trying to justify it, I think, will help you better understand the motivations that the product team needs to go through. So let me give you an example. I used to work at 140. It was the app store for Twitter. I don't know if any of you guys remember it from back in the day, 4 or 5 years ago. But we were basically a third-party app store. And one of the things that we did was anyone in the community could add an app. There were so many apps taking off back in like 2009, 2010, that there was no way that we could add them all ourselves and keep track of them, so we made it so anyone could. Unfortunately, that also meant that ads for Viagra pills got added to the site, and all kinds of spammers were crushing us. And so our community manager we had was spending tons of time manually deleting them, and we didn't have a great system to delete them. She literally had to go one by one, click delete, click delete, click delete. This was killing a ton of her day, and no one had any idea until we were sitting at the lunch table as a small team one day, and she was groaning about how much time she was wasting on it. She was spending half her day almost every day just trying to make sure that our homepage didn't have Viagra pills on it. And so that was when our engineering product team went, wow, okay, we need to do something about this because our community manager has better things to do than delete spam all day. And so we actually ended up prioritizing that right away to do something about it, because it turns out that was actually something really easy for engineering to build. So your goal during the prioritization phase for your product team is to try and quantify and share the value of your problems. Anything you can do to make it more tangible for them will help them better prioritize what's really going on. So in the next step, now you're building. Now this is where the engineering and design team gets involved, and the product team's actually trying to create this new feature. So the first thing is, you don't want to try to do their job. Just like you wouldn't want the product manager to tell you how to run your community. You want to try and avoid getting too deeply involved in what the product team is doing. And if you don't want to take my word for it, Natalia Krasnodevska of Shapeways had an awesome story she relayed to me when they were working on a project she was really fired up about. As she put it, quote, "In my excitement, I told product what I thought the community wanted, and then how exactly to make it, and what it should look like." And unfortunately, despite that passion being great and exciting, by trying to jump so much into their product process, she managed to piss off every product manager on the team. So if you're trying to build that relationship with product to make them want to listen and work with you more, you want to try to avoid getting on their bad side. And so there's a better way to get involved and help them with making sure the solution's right. So what you want to do is you do want to bring community to the product. I love this saying by Epictetus, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. And as a community manager, you guys have like 1 billion ears compared to a product person because you guys are interacting with them every day. And so you can be another set of ears for your product team and helping them to understand that. And so the ways that you can get community then into the product are a few things. First of all, one of the best ones is dog fooding features pre-launch. So I'm curious, how many of you guys get to see stuff when it's like up on staging or before it's out there for the full community? Awesome. So this is a great opportunity for you guys to say, hey, red flag here, or hey, what if we did it this way, or hey, I anticipate that people are going to have these issues, or these users are going to potentially have problems. Helping them anticipate that before they fully launch it is a huge way to avoid like major pitfalls. Another thing you can do is obviously invite product into the conversations in the community. If you know there are specific users that are dying for this feature, get them looped in earlier. Can they be someone to get early access to the feature? Can they be someone that they're getting feedback from early on in the product? Most product managers I know, it's always a pain to find customers to talk to, especially when you're trying to create a solution. You end up having email tons and tons of people. So if you can help lower that bar a little bit by saying, hey, I know 10 people that have been bugging me like crazy for this feature. They would love to talk to you. That's going to really endear you to your product team because that's going to help them when they're looking for those people to get feedback from. And the last thing is, share examples from others. So when you come to conferences like this and you hear about how other people are doing it, most product managers I know are pretty scientific and data-driven. And so if you can say, hey, the team at Etsy does it this way, or the team at Shapeways does it this way, or the team at BuzzFeed, like knowing what other people are doing and saying, hey, look, they did this and it worked really well, can we try it too? And here's how maybe we can do it. Those are all great ways to really make them feel like, oh, it's not just a crazy idea, this is how some of the best people do it. We want to be the best, we should do it that way too. So an example is my friend Ryan Hoover started a site called Product Hunt. It's like a Reddit or a Hacker News for new products. And what's great is Ryan is one of the most passionate product people I've ever met. He tries stuff new in the Valley before most people even heard of him. So this was perfect for him. And so he straddles the world between being the community manager for his startup and being the product guy. And what's great about that is how much he integrates the community then into the product process. Like I literally saw this morning, he sent an email out to the email list. And he's literally showing them mocks of like a new version of the product and new features he's thinking about to solicit feedback from the most passionate users of his product. And so he's actually wedding those two. And so ideally, as you guys work with your teams, if you can help the product team also have that feeling of connection to the community, it can go a long way towards building solutions that are a better fit. So during the build process, your goal is to help them make sure that the product fits with your community really well. So the next step is the launch. And the launch is obviously really exciting because this is when you finally can say, hey guys, we made this awesome thing for you and it's really going to work. So the first thing is, I don't know if any of you guys have made this mistake before, but I certainly am guilty of it. If you promise a release date to your community and you're wrong, they let you hear about it usually. They'll mark it on their calendar. There will be people who will never forget when you do that. So be careful promising a specific launch date. What I love to do instead is just build anticipation and say like, coming soon. And you send them a little like snapshot of a corner of it or something. And that just builds anticipation. They don't know when they're getting it. You didn't tell them it's coming on Tuesday. You just said, hey, soon, soon. Get ready, get excited. Building anticipation is so much better. And what you also want to do is you want to help the product team with early adopter users. So anyone who's really fired up about this new feature that's coming, get them involved, get them excited. At least at KissMetrics, we had this awesome way that we could give users early access to features before everyone else. So we could do a soft launch. So we could get it in front of maybe 10, 20 people who were most fired up about it anyways. And they would tell us, hey, this part of it, not so good. This doesn't work the way I wanted it to. Or hey, this part's awesome. This is my favorite part. And by doing that, it makes it much easier to make sure that when you do a full launch, you don't go and have a bunch of people raging and trying to be like, you did it wrong, you ruined my favorite thing. You don't want that. So ideally, you want to help the product team not have that happen. And so how do you collaborate great on a launch? Well, if you can help anticipate issues, this is the dog fooding that it looks like a lot of you guys are doing. I'm so happy to hear that. Because if you can help anticipate, like, hey, I think the community is going to be confused here, or hey, I'm just not sure this is going to work right, let's get it in front of a couple of people, those are all things that are really going to help make sure you have a great launch. Obviously, building the anticipation is huge. If you can get people to be really looking forward to this, I think that's always going to be a positive for your community, because then when it comes, it's like this big build up and then a huge bunch of excitement. And then this is another one that's huge, is letting your community know that they're heard is awesome. You may think that your users just know, like, hey, we launched that feature and it was something you asked about 6 months ago, so you just know that we were paying attention. But most people will assume it's a coincidence unless you tell them. So one of the things I did as a product manager, and you guys can do as community people, is let people know, hey, you're being heard. You asked for that, we finally listened, we could finally do something about it. I know it was always awesome when I was able to email a customer and say, hey, you know that thing you asked me about 6 months ago that I had to say no to? We finally did it. Here, would you like to check it out? People are always super pumped about that. It makes them feel special, and it makes them want to give more feedback, which is really helpful because now you're building up more and more of a community that wants to help make your product great. And then, of course, if there are things that may be confusing that you're not going to be able to change in the product, build documentation and education in advance. That way, from the start, they're going to have the places to look to find stuff. So an example when I was at 140 was we had these things called toolkits. And so they were a collection of Twitter apps that people used in their day-to-day, and people could explain how they use them and how they all fit together. And so when we were working on that launch, we were very specific about it. So when we started out, we got a bunch of influencers like Steve Rubel and David Armano to try and make toolkits very early on before we launched. So what that meant was, first of all, we had influencers who gave us feedback on the product before we even launched. So we were able to make a few tweaks based on what they said. But then also, when we did do our press launch, not only did the press get to see like great examples that they could link to in their stories, but now we had other people, influencers in the community, talking about our feature from day zero. They were instantly talking like, hey, I made this toolkit, it just came out today and I've already got it, check it out, it's awesome. I'm awesome and they're awesome. And it also then made it so other people in the community said, hey, this is good enough for Steve Rubel and David Armano. I can make a toolkit too. I'm going to make one too. I'm going to be as awesome as them. And so it created this awesome self-fulfilling prophecy of a great launch because we lined up all the things like dominoes. So your goal during the launch phase is to build excitement and involve your users as early as possible because that's going to help you build the right stuff. So the last step is iterate. I think this is actually the most important step and unfortunately gets overlooked a lot. But this is the step where you can go from making a meh product to an awesome one. So the first thing is don't separate yourself from the product team. So I know none of you would ever throw the product team under the bus. But what you might do is say in a tweet, they're working very hard on it, don't worry. What you really want to say is you want to always be one team. It's we're working on it. We're one team, one company. So resist the temptation to have any kind of separation. You don't want any us versus them situations. What you do want to do is help product understand community feedback. So I have a story. When I was at KissMetrics, we launched a new feature, and we were super excited. We thought it was awesome. We spent tons of time iterating and designing it. We spent a bunch of time thinking about inspiration on how it could be really cool, and then our community hated it. So when we launched, we got a bunch of tweets like this. So this guy, Pageman, said, this is our CEO, Heaton Shaw, tweets directly to him. Not happy with the changes to the live activity monitor. I'm not able to see full URLs anymore, which was key to understanding behavior. And so he's not happy, but at least, unlike some of the other ones, he was nice enough to tell us why he wasn't happy. But what was great was, he immediately replied and passed this on to our team. And so all the people that were raging on us across all kinds of channels, we made sure we followed up with every single one of them to find out why they were upset and trying to make it better for them. And we got their feedback, and a week later we actually launched changes that made people go from being angry like Pageman to Pageman tweeting again, thanks Heaton, just saw the fix go live today. I've never seen a company as responsive to its customers as KissMetrics. We turned a guy from super angry to loving us. And my favorite part is, as you guys know as community managers very well, when you put a character in front of the @ now everyone sees it instead of just people that follow both people. So he went from privately, or more privately on Twitter, telling us there was a problem, and then now he told every one of his followers how much he loves KissMetrics. So doing this iteration can go very far in making your community love you. So how can you connect product to the community? There's a bunch of awesome things you can do. You can obviously introduce the users who requested the feature. You can relay feedback you're hearing, like those tweets. And you can connect product directly to a spectrum of users. Especially as your business grows, your power users are not going to be representative of your whole business. Early on, as you're trying to get the product market fit, you may have your power users be your most valuable feedback. But as you grow, those power users are going to ask for some ridiculous features that most people will never use and never need. At that point, your product team actually needs to talk to Joe Average User and disengaged users and people who are less motivated but still part of the community, because that full spectrum suddenly represents tons of people. And helping product get that full spectrum is something that you guys are uniquely qualified for because you eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. So if you do find that there are methods where you can make really passionate users, help the product team understand that. Because if they know how to make these power users and how people are getting super passionate in the product, maybe it's a feature that's buried too much. Maybe it's a certain experience they need to have early on when they first become part of the product, or maybe it's something you're manually doing. If there are things you know that really can turn people from kind of into the product to loving it, let the product team know, because that's a great way to make your product much more engaging and have more people super fired up about it. So a great example of doing this is customer drinks and dinners. So Grasshopper and FreshBooks, when their founders and product team are traveling, they host dinners in the cities they're in with customers. They pay for dinner and just listen to what customers have to say. And Salesforce famously, even from their very early days, did drink-ups with prospective and existing customers so that they could talk to them as well. And of course, if you were here yesterday, Etsy talked about when people travel home for the holidays, they give a bunch of their team a budget so that they can host a meetup with Etsy sellers as well, which gets everyone connected. So you can see that even people who came here today are doing some of that. So your goal during the iteration process is to bring the voice of the community into the product, and there's obviously lots of ways to do that. So let's kind of recap real quick here. So in the community and product lifecycle, the first step is the product manager is going to gather the signals, trying to figure out all of the possible priorities they could have. And what you can do to help most is communicate problems instead of a long feature request list. And the next step, you're prioritizing, or the product manager is prioritizing. And the best way you can help them with them deciding, all right, we can build lots of things, but we can only build one thing. The best thing you can do is quantify the value of the problems that you're conveying so they understand how important they are. Then in the next step, you want the product team is going to build a solution, and what you want to do is help add the personality and help bring the community's feedback in. And then when there's actual launch, you're helping engage and excite the community for it. They're anticipating the launch and they're engaging them. Yeah. And the final step is iterating. And in that step, you want to bring their voice back to make sure they're not being missed. And so the big thing I want you to remember is, like the cookie story, remember that sometimes your perspective is just different. And so realize that product and community can come from different worlds, but hopefully you've learned a few things today that will help you bridge that gap better and better work with your product team so you can build awesome products.